What's going on today? We're in Hebrews chapter 11, and the whole foundation of this chapter, by the way, before we hop into it, is all people who had faith in the Old Testament. So I'm going to try to cross-reference as best as I can. Without that being said, let's hop into it. And verse 1 it says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancestors were commanded for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible." So by faith we believe God created the universe. Genesis, in the beginning was God, and he created the universe. And that's what we believe. We don't believe in a Big Bang. We don't believe in some organism that fell on the earth and we came from fish, we turned into monkeys, we turned into humans. We don't believe that. We believe that God created everything, and he created the universe, and he created man in his image. We did not come from a fish who made from a monkey who made a human. That is not what happened. God created man, tells us that in the Bible. And yeah, by faith we believe this. And 4 says, by faith Abel brought a better offering than Cain. By faith he was commanded as righteous when God spoke well of his offering. And by faith Abel still speaks even though he's dead. You can find Cain and Abel's story in Genesis 4. Little side piece, if you don't know, Cain and Abel were Adam and Eve's sons. And yeah, Abel and Cain both brought God offerings, and Abel's was better because his was by faith. And so Cain ended up killing Abel, and his blood shed on the ground. And God was like, "Cain, where's your brother Abel?" And Cain was trying to cover it up. But yeah, that's their story. You can go read it in Genesis chapter 4. And continuing on, it says, by faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commanded as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek. So by faith we believe God is there even though we cannot see him. The story of Enoch, you can be found in Genesis chapter 5. And yeah, continuing on, it says, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen and only fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness, and that is in keeping faith. And obviously Noah built the ark. You can find this in Genesis chapter 6. And yeah, like I said, I'm going to continue to try to cross-reference as best as I can. So if you're someone who's a Bible nerd, Bible scholar, whatnot, whatever you want to call it, go look up these verses, go read their stories. Continuing on, it says, by faith Abraham, when called to go to the place he would later receive his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he lived and made his home in the promised land, like a stranger to a foreign country. You can find his story in Genesis chapter 12. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was able to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. And so from this one man, and he is good as dead, came descendants of numerous as stars in the sky, as countless as the sand in the seashore. You can find their story in Genesis 17. Yeah. Continuing on, it says, all these people who were living by faith, when they died, they did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers of earth. So they're promised that this is going to happen, but they were not here to see it happen. Like Abraham, God said, you're descendants will be like the stars. And he only had his son Isaac and Jacob. And yeah, he indeed did have offsprings for many generations, and just like God promised, but he did not get to see that happen as he was on earth. He died without seeing that, but he had faith that God will fulfill his promise. Continuing on, it says, and 14, people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had not been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he prepared a city for them. The city he prepared is heaven. So don't seek human things, seek the kingdom of God. And by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced a promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offsprings will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise him from the dead, so in the manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from dead. You can find their story in Genesis 22, and yeah, God was basically like testing Abraham's faith by saying, "Come and sacrifice your son Isaac." And so they went on a little hike, and then he was prepared to sacrifice him. And the angel was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You don't really need to kill your son to please God." And Abraham showed his faithfulness to God because he knew God had a plan, and he was going along for the ride, and God provided. And 20 says, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he led on top of his staff. Those stories can be found in Genesis 27 and Genesis 48. By faith Joseph, when his end near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. This story can be found in Genesis 50. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child and they were afraid of a king's etiquette. By faith, Moses, when had grown up, refused to be known as a son of Pharaoh's daughter. You can find the story in Exodus chapter 2. Moses' story, basically, the Pharaoh, I believe, was killing off sons and whatnot. So Moses' real parents hid him and then later washed him down a riverbed and picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter. And he was raised in that lifestyle. And yeah, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. You can find the story in Exodus 12. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as dry as land, but when the Egyptians tried to, they drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. These stories can be found in Exodus 14 and give me a second. Exodus 14. I want to say Joseph. Joshua, yeah. Exodus 14 and Joshua chapter 6 and chapter 2. Sorry about that little pause. Had to look it up. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. You can find her story in Joshua chapter 2. And what more shall I say? I do not have the time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who though faith conquered kingdoms, administrated justice and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of the lions, quenched in the fury of flames, and escaped the judge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in the battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chairs and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheep kinks and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not wealthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in grounds. Whew, that was a lot to unpack. Okay, so you can find their stories in Judges chapter 4 and 5, 1 Samuel chapter 16, 1 Samuel chapter 1, 2 Samuel chapter 7, Deuteronomy chapter 6, 2 Kings chapter 20, Judges chapter 15, 1 Kings chapter 17, Jeremiah chapter 20, Genesis chapter 30, 2 Chronicles chapter 24, 1 Kings chapter 19, 2 Kings chapter 1. Whew! That was a lot. If you need to replay my video or go to the back part to try to write down these scriptures, if you want to go and look them up for yourself, by all means, do that. And these were all commanded by their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us they would be made perfect. That was a lot, but the Old Testament had many, many people who were faithful to God. Many, many people who brought the world to God, do the best they could. Because if you don't know, you should know, but maybe someone's new to faith. In the Old Testament, Jesus was not yet around, so there was no way for someone to be saved, someone to be in the presence of God without having faith in him, without him destroying stuff, without Jesus was not that bridge yet. And so these people did all these actions, all their faith, with God on their side, having faith in him, with no one to look to besides the one true God. And we are kind of spoiled. We have Jesus. Jesus has walked on this earth. He showed us how to live, and we have the scriptures and how we can follow his way. These people did not have God come to earth in human form and to walk the earth and then follow his ways. They had to go through their struggles, their own ways, and many, many of them persevered through the thick and thin. And one of the most famous people in the Old Testament is David, one of the greatest kings there was, but he went through a lot of hardships. Of course, he was not perfect. He did a lot of horrible things that are documented in the Bible. But nevertheless, he had faith in God at the end of the day. This is what you need to take away from Hebrews chapter 11. Have faith for God in the thick and thin. Yes, we cannot see him, but have faith that he is there. Believe in him. I love you because he first loved me. Feel free to write down all those books and chapters that I said. I know I talked kind of fast to try to get them out there because there's a lot of stories in the Old Testament that were packed into this one chapter in Hebrews. But they're all good stories. So if you never heard any of those stories, go look them up. Go do your research. I love you because you first loved me. Have a blessed day.